Your presence at this all-important meeting as participants, as experts, as speakers and observers is an indication of your individual and collective commitment to the aspirations and ideals of the community. Let me especially welcome the representatives of the United Kingdom, China, Saudi Arabia, and all permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, their representatives, the representative of ECOWAS, as well as other nations and organizations with observer status, and commend you for your continuing support for the CEN-SAD. And we hope that we can count on this cooperation and support well into the future. The theme of the meeting, which is consolidating the achievements of the fight against terrorism through development actions, is especially apt as it focuses attention on the role of non-military components of the fight against terrorism and violent extremism. If there is anything that we have learned from our experience fighting Boko Haram in Nigeria, it is that the battle is as much social and economic as it is a military one. It was Ban Ki-moon, the former UN Secretary General, who said famously, and I quote, that bullets may stop terrorists, but only development, good governance, and respect for human rights can prevent terrorism, end of quote. Indeed, the military aspect of the fight against terrorism is a short-term one. Enduring victory will only come from swiftly and diligently building on the military victories by implementing over the long term policies that comprehensively tackle poverty, illiteracy, and frustration, which predispose individuals and communities to imbibing extremist beliefs and ideologies. And I'll come back to this point shortly. But the narrative is worsened by the fact that violent extremism and terrorism do not walk alone. They are usually to be found interlinked with human trafficking, drug trafficking, illicit trade in drugs and arms, and various other forms of transnational organized crimes. Within the community, the security challenge has assumed new dimensions since especially the Arab Spring, and with the collapse of the Gaddafi regime in Libya proving to be a watershed moment. Countries such as ours, such as Nigeria, Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, have since experienced an escalation of the twin global threats of violence, extremism, and terrorism, among others. This escalation of threats and vulnerabilities in the region has become an immediate and urgent security threat to the community. But it's also encouraging to note that significant progress has been made to contain the terrorist challenges through the individual and collective actions of our respective states and through our respective regional economic communities. The successes of the Multinational Joint Task Force, MNJTF, of the Lake Chad Basin Commission in combating the Boko Haram menace in the sub-region has significantly reduced and resulted in the degrading of the group, of the Boko Haram group in particular, and in terms of membership and recruitment of and its combat capabilities. Similarly, the African Mission in Somalia, AMISOM, with the support of the United Nations and other strategic partners, has made impressive progress in the fight against al-Shabaab terrorists in Somalia and in the Horn of Africa generally. In this ongoing fight against terrorism and violent extremism, the importance of intelligence sharing by member states of the community has strongly come to the fore, considering the achievements recorded by the Regional Intelligence Fusion Unit, RIFU, of the MNJTF in the joint fight against the Boko Haram, as well as the gains made through the Sahel Fusion Liaison Units, which have arisen from the Nouakchott process and the Djibouti process. Also, the countries of the Horn of Africa and East Africa have recently launched the East African Fusion Liaison Unit, the EAFLU, in Kampala, Uganda. Besides, there have also been the Sharm el-Sheikh Declaration of 2016 by the Community of Defense Ministers of CEN-SAD, which reinforces the cooperation of member states in the fight against terrorism and violent extremism, and the Cocody Declaration, which addressed, inter alia, the control and regulation of the movement of small arms and light weapons through the borders of member states. But Your Excellencies, Honorable Ministers, as the theme of this meeting so clearly outlines, and as I mentioned earlier, this is not a battle for militaries and intelligence agencies alone. If it were, there would be no serious cause for alarm. This is a fight that cannot and will not be won without a collective and determined focus on all those elements that entrench poverty, want, and conflict amongst the people of the community, and that sow the seeds of the criminal exploitation and violence. These elements include the ecological threats of desertification and drought, as well as the phenomenon of forced human migration. Africa has historically been susceptible to desertification due to the preponderance of semi-arid, arid, and hyper-arid lands. Climate change and other factors collectively exacerbate these natural geographical conditions to make more than 309 million hectares of Africa vulnerable to desertification. In the CEN-SAD community, the Sahara Desert is advancing southwards at an alarming rate of 600 meters annually. A typical example is the shrinking of the Lake Chad due to climate change and human overuse. From about 25,000 square kilometers in 1963, Lake Chad, one of the world's largest freshwater lakes, has shrunk by 95% to a current size of 1,300 square kilometers. There are alarming predictions that the Lake Chad may indeed dry up completely in 20 years. The Lake Chad Basin, which straddles 4 nations in the community, previously supported more than 30 million inhabitants in its vicinity. The shrinking Lake Chad provides a graphic example of the notorious nexus between the environment and human conflict. There are strong indications that much of the violent conflicts in the community can be linked to the passive and active resource conflicts associated with the shrinking lake. People whose ancestors made a comfortable living off the land and water as farmers and fishermen are now confronted with displacement and vastly diminished opportunities. In acknowledgement of this nexus, the Nigerian government is spearheading a collective plan to recharge the Lake Chad with water from the Congo Basin by constructing a 2,500 kilometer navigable channel from the river Ubangi. This project requires unprecedented levels of political cooperation of member states of the community and technical collaboration and financial partnership from our international partners, governments, development institutions, and investors. The planned recharging of the Lake Chad is just one of the many serious interventions to mitigate the worst effects of climate change in our region and on the continent. The Great Green Wall, put forward as a Pan-African initiative to combat desertification in the community, is another such initiative, and it is wholly deserving of our support and our praise. Under this initiative, trees are being planted in a land strip stretching 7,775 kilometers across the entire region of Africa, from Senegal to Djibouti, to stop the desertification. Another serious contemporary security threat is the issue of forced migration of people from the community. With over 13 million internally displaced persons in 19 countries, Africa remains the continent most affected by internal displacement. Forced migration of people, particularly young people, from the member states of our community to Europe through illegal, unregulated, and highly risky routes has lately become a serious, protracted, and expanding global problem. That it is also big business for the powerful transnational criminal syndicates that organize it further, and this just makes it even more complicated. we are confronted by the serious challenge of keeping our young people at home and providing them enough social and economic opportunities to deter them from falling for the hopes of greener pastures as illegal migrants in distant countries. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, as governments, we have our work cut out for us. As leaders in the national and security and defense establishments in our member states, I urge you to promote the agreements and partnerships that will enable the community fully bridge our development gaps and meet the rapidly growing needs of present and future generations of our people. It is certainly in our collective interest to act proactively in this regard by enabling and catalyzing the jobs and prosperity without which these battles cannot be lastingly won. And finally, I wish you very fruitful deliberations today and tomorrow, and hope that at the end of this meeting we shall have outcomes capable of bringing enduring peace and security and development to the CEN-SAD community. It is now my very special pleasure and privilege to declare the 7th meeting of Ministers of Defense of Member States of the Community of Sahel and Sahara States